The lunch hour was always the busiest time at the restaurant, and Maya had grown used to the constant clatter of dishes, the hum of voices, and the occasional impatient shout from a customer. She moved quickly between the tables, balancing plates on her arms with practiced ease, her face calm even when her legs ached from hours of standing. For most people, she was just a waitress in a black uniform with a bright smile that never seemed to fade. What no one saw was how much she carried inside. Maya was only 24, yet she worked double shifts almost every day, saving every penny she could to help pay for her mother's medicines and her younger brother's school fees. Life had been heavy, but she never let her struggles show while she was on the job. That day, the restaurant was filled with the golden glow of the afternoon sun. Families chatted happily, children laughed, and businessmen talked over hurried meals. Maya greeted a group of regulars with her usual warmth and refilled their drinks, her mind focused on the rhythm of her work. She didn't notice at first when a new family entered. They were dressed in elegant clothes that looked expensive even to someone who didn't pay much attention to fashion. The mother had a pearl necklace, the kind Maya had only ever seen in magazines, while the father stayed quiet, walking a little behind them. Two small children, twins, ran ahead, giggling as if they owned the place. Maya noticed them when she bent down to pick up a fallen spoon near the entrance. The twins, a boy and a girl about 6 years old, darted toward the staircase that led to the restaurant's second-floor balcony seating. Their laughter was light, but their feet moved too fast. Maya glanced back at the parents, expecting them to call the children to slow down, but the mother was busy checking her phone and the father remained silent, his expression unreadable. As the twins disappeared up the stairs, Maya felt a quick pang of concern. Children running near the balcony never seemed safe, but she reminded herself that parents usually kept an eye on them. She returned to her work, serving a steaming bowl of soup to a customer and writing down another order. Still, the thought of those small feet running close to the railings nagged at her. Upstairs, the twins leaned over the balcony, pointing excitedly at something below. They waved at another table, their giggles echoing above the chatter of the crowd. The railing was sturdy, but children didn't always know their limits. Then, in a moment so sudden that no one else noticed, the girl tripped over her shoelace while leaning too far forward. The boy tried to grab her arm, but the motion pulled him off balance too. Together, they stumbled over the railing. Maya was carrying a tray of drinks when the corner of her eye caught the flash of movement. For a second, she thought it was her imagination, but then her heart raced. She saw the twins falling, their small bodies tumbling downward in helpless slow motion. A shock of fear surged through her, yet her body moved before her mind could even process what was happening. She dropped the tray, glass shattering around her feet, and rushed forward with all the speed she could gather. The restaurant seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped, and people turned their heads in confusion, not yet understanding what was happening. Maya's hands stretched out as she lunged beneath the falling children. The force nearly knocked her over, but she twisted her body, bracing herself as she caught both of them against her chest. The impact was strong, and she staggered backward, almost losing balance, but somehow she stayed on her feet. Gasps filled the room. The sound of broken glass still echoed near her shoes, but no one cared about that anymore. All eyes were on the waitress holding two frightened children in her arms. The twins clung to her neck, their faces pale with shock. Maya lowered herself to the ground slowly, speaking softly to calm them down. "It's okay, you're safe now. Don't be scared," she whispered, her voice trembling but gentle. The mother finally looked up from her phone, her eyes widening in horror. She rushed over, heels clicking sharply against the floor. "My babies," she cried, reaching for them, but her voice carried more panic about the scene than gratitude toward the woman who had saved them. The father walked behind her, his pace calm, his eyes fixed on Maya in a way that made her feel as though he was studying her every movement. Maya carefully handed the twins over. They were crying softly, still holding onto her sleeve until their mother pulled them away. For a moment, silence lingered. Then whispers spread among the other diners. Some praised her bravery, saying they had never seen someone react so quickly. Others shook their heads, muttering about the dangers of letting children run loose. A few waitresses at the counter exchanged doubtful glances, one even whispering that Maya had been reckless to throw down a tray of drinks like that. But none of that mattered to Maya. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, and her arms ached from the sudden weight of catching two children at once. She sat back on her heels for a moment, catching her breath. She looked down at her uniform, now stained with spilled juice and bits of glass dust. For a second, she worried that the manager might be upset about the broken dishes. She didn't think about the danger she had just faced, only the trouble she might get into for making a mess. The mother fussed over the twins, adjusting their clothes and checking their faces for scratches. "You must be more careful," she scolded them, her tone sharp even though she was clearly shaken. The children clung together, their eyes still glancing toward Maya, who gave them a reassuring smile before quietly beginning to clean the broken glass at her feet. The father finally spoke, his voice low but steady. "They are unharmed," he said softly, as though confirming it to himself. His gaze lingered on Maya for a few seconds longer than necessary, but then he turned away, guiding his family back to their table. It was almost as if nothing had happened, except the entire restaurant had just witnessed a moment no one would soon forget. Maya continued working, though her hands trembled slightly as she swept the shards into a dustpan. Customers gave her nods of respect, and one even whispered, "That girl is a hero." Maya felt embarrassed hearing such words. She didn't think of herself as a hero. She only did what her heart told her to do in that split second. By the time her shift ended that evening, the incident still played over in her mind. She wondered why the parents, especially the father, had seemed so distant in their gratitude. Most people would have been in tears, hugging her for saving their children. Instead, she had received a few polite words and a quiet nod. She shrugged it off, telling herself she was just a waitress. People like that family lived in a different world, one she had no place in. But deep inside, the memory of the children's little arms clinging to her neck stayed with her. She didn't know that this moment, this act of courage that no one else had seen coming, would change her life in ways she could never imagine. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtains of Maya's small apartment. She woke up tired, her body sore from the events of the day before. Her arms still ached from catching the twins, and her mind replayed the moment over and over again. Each time she closed her eyes, she could see the children falling, hear their little gasps, and feel the weight of their bodies landing in her arms. It had all happened so quickly, yet the memory felt like it lasted forever. She sat up, stretched, and rubbed her face. She had another long shift ahead, and she couldn't afford to be late. Her mother was already awake, sitting at the small kitchen table with a cup of tea. Maya greeted her warmly, masking her exhaustion. She didn't mention much about the incident at work. She simply said she had a busy day, because she didn't want her mother to worry. Her younger brother, Jamal, was eating a bowl of cereal, chattering about his schoolwork and a project he needed help with. Maya listened, smiling, even though her thoughts drifted back to the restaurant. By the time she reached work, the buzz about what had happened had already spread. Several co-workers whispered about it near the counter, their voices low but filled with curiosity. A few were impressed, but others sounded skeptical. "She could have hurt herself," one said. "She dropped a tray full of drinks," another added, shaking her head. "The manager isn't going to like that." When Maya walked in, all eyes seemed to fall on her for a moment. She gave them a small nod, tied her apron, and started her usual routine. She didn't care for gossip, and she wasn't looking for praise. She only wanted to do her job. Still, the stares made her cheeks warm. She hated being the center of attention. Later in the afternoon, a couple of regular customers called her over. One elderly man said kindly, "You're the girl who saved those children yesterday, aren't you? I was sitting at the far table. You moved like lightning." Another woman chimed in, "I told my family about you last night. You must have been terrified, but you didn't hesitate." Maya smiled politely. "I just did what anyone would do," she replied. Deep inside, though, she wasn't sure anyone else would have. She had seen how frozen everyone looked in that moment. Still, she didn't want to sound proud or boastful. As the hours passed, more people whispered about her bravery, but not everyone's words were kind. A few co-workers continued to murmur doubts. One suggested she only acted that way for attention. Another muttered that she had cost the restaurant money with the broken glasses. Maya overheard some of it, but she refused to let it sink into her heart. She told herself it didn't matter. When the family from yesterday returned, however, everything changed. Maya didn't notice them at first because she was busy serving a large group. But then she heard the familiar voices of the twins. They spotted her from across the room and called out, "That's her. That's the lady who caught us." Their small faces lit up with recognition, and they waved at her. Maya waved back shyly, her lips curling into a soft smile. She was happy to see them safe and cheerful again. She expected their mother to hush them or remind them to sit quietly, but instead, the woman gave Maya only a brief glance before looking away. Her expression was polite but cold, as though she wanted to pretend nothing had happened. The father sat with them again, calm as before, saying little. His presence was strong even in silence. His sharp eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on Maya, it felt as though he saw straight through her. She quickly turned away, focusing on her tray of plates, but her heart beat faster. There was something about his steady gaze that unsettled her. When she brought water to their table, the twins leaned toward her eagerly. "Thank you for saving us," the little girl said, her voice clear and innocent. "You're like a superhero," her brother added, his eyes wide with admiration. Their words made Maya chuckle softly. She bent slightly, whispering back, "I'm no superhero, just someone who didn't want you to get hurt. You both must be more careful next time, okay?" The twins nodded enthusiastically, but their mother cleared her throat sharply. "Children, enough. Sit properly." She shot Maya a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you again," she said stiffly, then returned to her meal. Maya walked away, puzzled by the woman's coldness. She had expected more warmth, more gratitude, especially after what had almost happened. But the mother seemed more concerned with appearances than anything else. The twins' father, however, said nothing at all. He simply observed, his face unreadable. Later, when the family left, Maya noticed the father had given the manager a quiet nod. The manager quickly hurried over to speak with him, while the staff watched with curiosity. No one could hear their conversation, but it was clear the man carried weight and influence. The way the manager bowed his head and listened intently spoke volumes. After the family departed, the whispers began again. Some thought the man might be a politician or a businessman. Others guessed he was someone important, given his air of authority. Maya didn't join the chatter. She returned to wiping down tables, but her mind was unsettled. Who was this man really? And why did his eyes linger on her in a way that felt so heavy, as though he was carrying thoughts he wouldn't share? That night, when Maya finally got home, she lay on her bed staring at the ceiling. The twins' laughter still rang in her ears. The memory of their arms clinging to her neck replayed, along with their innocent words of thanks. She smiled faintly, but then she remembered their mother's cold expression and the father's silence. Something about it all seemed strange. She turned over, hugging her pillow. She didn't know that the quiet man was thinking about her too. He had been watching her not just yesterday, but again today. He had seen how she carried herself, how she smiled warmly at strangers, how she endured whispers from co-workers without complaint. He had seen something few others noticed, a strength that went beyond her job as a waitress. Maya fell asleep not knowing that her small act of courage was no longer just a memory for a few customers. It was becoming something much larger. People had begun to talk, and one man in particular was beginning to make decisions that would soon change her life. The father of the twins, Mr. Lawson, had lived most of his life avoiding unnecessary attention. He was a man who preferred silence over noise, and thought before he spoke. While many saw only a calm face and a quiet figure in the corner of the restaurant, those who knew him well understood that he carried the weight of a powerful life. He was the head of a vast company that owned hotels, restaurants, and properties across the city. People in business circles recognized his name immediately, but in ordinary places he often passed unnoticed because he did not flaunt his wealth. That was the way he liked it. When the twins nearly fell, and the waitress caught them, something stirred deep inside him. At first, he said nothing. He only watched as the young woman held his children close, calming them with a voice soft yet steady. It was not just the act itself that struck him, but the way she moved without hesitation. Many adults would have frozen, waiting for someone else to step in. She had risked herself, and that risk had saved his children. That night, long after his family had gone to bed, Mr. Lawson sat in his study, replaying the moment in his mind. His office was lined with shelves of books and awards, reminders of his success. Yet none of his wealth or power had been able to stop the accident. It was the young waitress, a stranger, who had done what no one else could. He thought of his younger brother, who had died in a fall when they were both children. He had been too small to save him, and the memory had never left his heart. Seeing his twins so close to the same fate had opened old wounds. The waitress's courage had closed them, if only a little. The next morning, he made a discreet phone call to the restaurant manager. His voice was steady but firm. "Tell me about the young woman who caught my children yesterday," he said. The manager hesitated, unsure if it was appropriate, but Mr. Lawson's tone allowed no refusal. Slowly, the manager explained. Her name was Maya. She had been working there for nearly 3 years. She was known for being hardworking, always willing to take extra shifts, and never complaining even when others did. She was respectful to customers and staff alike. But she lived in a small apartment, supporting her family on her wages. Mr. Lawson listened carefully. He asked a few more questions, each one revealing more pieces of her life. When the manager admitted that Maya had never once asked for favors, promotions, or special treatment, Mr. Lawson felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest. He admired strength, but what he admired most was character. This young woman had both. Over the next few days, he began to notice her more closely. When his family returned to the restaurant, he sat quietly as always, but his eyes followed her. He saw the way she greeted customers with kindness, no matter how they treated her. He noticed how she cleaned tables with care, making sure every corner shone even though few would notice. He even observed how she endured whispers from her co-workers without showing offense. She had dignity, the kind that could not be bought with money. The twins, of course, adored her. They often asked to see the lady who saved us. Whenever they spoke about her, their voices were full of excitement. Mr. Lawson felt a quiet gratitude he could not easily put into words. His children trusted her, and in his heart, he did too. One evening, after another long day at the office, Mr. Lawson sat in his car outside the restaurant, watching through the window. He saw Maya leaving late at night, walking alone toward the bus stop. She looked tired, her steps slow, but she carried herself with quiet strength. He could have called her over, revealed who he was, but something stopped him. He was not yet ready to show his true identity. Instead, he made another discreet decision. He told his driver to follow her bus route, to ensure she reached home safely. The following week, he instructed his company's human resource department to look into scholarships for local workers. He did not mention her name directly, but in his mind, he was already planning. He wanted her to have opportunities she never asked for but clearly deserved. At the same time, he asked his assistant to arrange for her mother's medical expenses to be covered anonymously. Maya, of course, knew nothing of this. She continued her days the same way, believing she was just an ordinary waitress. She did not see the way Mr. Lawson studied her, weighing his thoughts. To the world, he was simply a customer, but inside, he was a father whose respect for her grew deeper with each passing day. Yet, he also carried questions. Why had she acted so quickly? What kind of heart made someone throw aside fear to protect strangers? These were not things one could learn from a resume or a report. These were truths revealed only by life itself. Mr. Lawson decided he needed to speak with her directly, but not as a billionaire or an owner. He wanted to see her reaction when she thought he was just a man, nothing more. That chance came sooner than expected. One afternoon, he arrived at the restaurant alone. His wife and children were busy elsewhere. He requested a table in a quiet corner, and when Maya came to take his order, he looked at her with steady eyes. "You were the one who caught my children," he said softly. Maya's cheeks warmed. She nodded politely. "Yes, sir, but I only did what anyone would have done." His lips curved slightly, almost into a smile. "Not everyone would have moved so quickly." He paused, studying her face. "Are you all right? You carried both of them. You could have been hurt." Maya was surprised by his concern. She had not expected him to remember her well-being. She answered honestly. "I'm fine. Just a few bruises. I'm glad they were safe. That's all that matters." Mr. Lawson leaned back in his chair, silent for a moment. He could see the honesty in her eyes. She truly believed it was nothing extraordinary. That was what made it extraordinary. He wanted to say more, to tell her how much it meant, but he held back. He thanked her quietly, then finished his meal and left without revealing who he truly was. That night, however, he wrote in his private journal, something he rarely did anymore. He wrote about a waitress who had shown more courage than many men he had worked with. He wrote about how her actions had not only saved his children but also touched an old wound in his heart. And most of all, he wrote about how sometimes greatness was hidden in places no one expected. Maya continued her life without knowing that her name was already etched in the thoughts of a man whose decisions could change the course of her future. The story was only beginning, though neither of them could see how much their worlds were about to collide. Maya was busy arranging plates on a large table when the manager called her into his office. For a moment, her stomach tightened with worry. Managers rarely called waitresses in the middle of a busy shift unless something was wrong. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and walked toward the office, her mind racing. Maybe it was about the glasses she had dropped that day, or perhaps someone had complained. She knocked lightly and stepped in, her heart pounding. To her surprise, she found the quiet man sitting there, the father of the twins. He was dressed neatly in a dark suit, his posture straight but not intimidating. His eyes, sharp and calm, looked directly at her. The manager gave her a nod and excused himself, leaving the two of them alone. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Maya clasped her hands together, waiting. She didn't know why he was here or why he wanted to see her. After a moment of silence, he spoke in his deep, steady voice. "I wanted to thank you," he said. His words were simple, yet they carried weight. Maya shook her head gently. "There's no need for thanks, sir. Anyone would have done it. I just happened to be close." He studied her face carefully, as though weighing her words. "No," he said firmly. Not everyone would have moved. Many would have frozen. You acted without hesitation. My children are alive because of you. Her cheeks flushed at his words. She lowered her gaze, embarrassed by the attention. I was only doing what felt right, she murmured. For a long moment, he did not speak. Then, in a softer tone, he asked, "Are you sure you're well? You carried both of them. That was no small thing." "I'm fine," Maya replied quickly, though her arms still carried faint bruises from the fall. "The children were more important than me getting a little hurt." His expression softened slightly, though his eyes remained intense. "You think very little of your own safety," he said, almost to himself. Then he rose, smoothing his jacket. "Thank you, Maya. That is all I wished to say today." Maya blinked, startled. She had not expected him to know her name. She wondered how he had learned it, but she was too shy to ask. She simply nodded and left the office, her mind full of questions. For the next few days, small changes began happening in her life. Her mother's prescription, which had been delayed because of cost, was suddenly covered at the pharmacy. The landlord, who often complained about late rent, came by smiling and announced that their rent was paid ahead for several months. Maya was confused, but grateful. She thought perhaps there had been some community program she didn't know about. At work, she noticed other small surprises. A customer left a generous tip on a table she served, far larger than the bill itself. Another day, she found her manager unusually kind, giving her an extra break and complimenting her on her service. Maya felt like life was quietly shifting, though she couldn't explain why. Meanwhile, the twins did not forget her. Each time they came to the restaurant, they ran to her with bright smiles. "We want to sit at her table," they would shout, clinging to her apron. Maya laughed gently and knelt down to greet them, always reminding them to be careful and polite. Their innocence warmed her heart, and she found herself looking forward to their visits. Their mother, however, remained distant. She spoke politely but with a cool tone, as though Maya was simply a servant doing her duty. Her eyes often flicked toward Maya with something unreadable, perhaps irritation, perhaps suspicion. Maya could not tell. She respected the woman's space and never overstepped. The father, Mr. Lawson, remained quiet, but his presence was strong. He often sat back, letting the children chatter and his wife direct the conversation. Yet, from time to time, Maya caught him watching her not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but in a way that made her feel seen. It was as though he was observing more than her actions, he was observing her character. One evening, after the family left, a co-worker approached Maya with a curious smile. "Why do you think they like you so much?" she asked. "Those kids act like you're their best friend. And their father, he looks at you like he knows something the rest of us don't." Maya laughed nervously, shaking her head. "You're imagining things. I'm just their waitress. Children are friendly by nature." But deep down, she couldn't deny that there was something unusual about the way the father regarded her. He had thanked her sincerely, unlike the cold gratitude of his wife. He had asked about her well-being more than once. And somehow, though she had not told him, he knew her name. Unknown to Maya, Mr. Lawson was working behind the scenes. Through quiet channels, he had arranged for her family's financial burdens to be lifted. He did not want to overwhelm her with sudden gifts or make her feel indebted. He only wanted to ease her struggles in ways she wouldn't notice came from him. He respected her pride, and he knew she valued her independence. Still, he found himself drawn to her more than he expected. Her humility, her warmth, and her courage lingered in his mind even during his busiest hours at the office. He began to wonder if fate had placed her in his life for a reason. One afternoon, as Maya wiped down a counter, she overheard two of her co-workers whispering. "Why do you think the owner comes here so often now?" one asked. The owner. Maya frowned, confused. Yes, the other replied. Don't you know? That quiet man, the twins' father. He's the owner of this place. He owns the whole chain. Maya froze, her rag slipping from her hand. For a moment, she thought she had misheard. The owner? That man who sat silently in the corner, watching her with those deep eyes? Her heart raced as the truth sank in. She remembered the respectful way the manager spoke to him, the deference in his voice, the careful attention whenever he arrived. It all made sense now. Her mind spun with questions. Why had he not said anything? Why had he spoken to her as though he were just another customer? And why did he show such interest in her when he surely lived in a world far beyond hers? That night, she lay awake thinking about it. She didn't tell her mother or her brother. She wasn't even sure it was true. Perhaps her co-workers were mistaken. But in her heart, she knew. The pieces fit too neatly. The next time he came in, Maya looked at him differently. She saw not just a father, but a man carrying authority and influence. Yet, when his eyes met hers, he did not look down on her the way many wealthy people did. Instead, his gaze was steady, almost respectful. Maya realized then that she had stepped into something larger than herself, though she did not yet understand where it would lead. The following week began like any other for Maya. She arrived at the restaurant early, tying her apron and preparing herself for another long day of serving customers. The clatter of plates, the hiss of the coffee machine, and the endless footsteps across the tiled floor had become the rhythm of her life. She had learned to push her own worries aside and focus only on the faces of those she served. Yet deep inside, the discovery that the quiet man was actually the owner of the restaurant chain had left her unsettled. She had not confronted him, but the thought stayed with her every time she saw him. On a bright Friday afternoon, the atmosphere in the restaurant felt different. The staff rushed about nervously, polishing silverware and rearranging chairs as though expecting someone important. Maya asked one of her co-workers what was happening, but the girl only shrugged, saying the manager wanted everything perfect because a special guest was coming. Maya went about her tasks quietly, though her heart told her she already knew who that guest would be. Not long after, the door opened, and in walked the familiar family. The twins ran ahead, their laughter filling the room. Maya, they shouted, spotting her almost immediately. They dashed toward her, throwing their small arms around her waist. The other customers turned to stare, surprised by the children's open affection. Maya laughed softly, bending down to greet them. Their mother followed with her usual composed expression, while their father Mr. Lawson walked behind, calm and dignified. But this time, instead of choosing a quiet corner, he headed directly to the center of the restaurant. His presence seemed to draw every eye. Even the manager hurried out, bowing respectfully. Mr. Lawson raised his hand, signaling for silence. The chatter slowly died down until the entire room was still. Maya froze where she stood, confused. Her heart began to race as Mr. Lawson turned his gaze toward her. His deep voice carried across the restaurant. Yesterday, a young woman did something most of us might hesitate to do. She risked herself without thought for her own safety, saving the lives of my children. His words echoed through the room. That woman is standing among you now. Whispers spread quickly. All eyes turned toward Maya. She felt her cheeks burn as she lowered her gaze, wishing she could disappear. She never wanted attention, she only wanted to do her job quietly. Yet now she stood in the center of it all, her apron stained with work, her hands trembling slightly. Mr. Lawson continued, his voice firm but warm. Some of you may know her as just a waitress. But to me and my family, she is much more. Her courage cannot go unnoticed. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Maya, I am not only the father of those twins. I am also the owner of this restaurant and many others like it. And today, I want the world to know what you did. Gasps rippled through the staff and customers. Maya's knees felt weak. The truth was now out in the open. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with disbelief. He gave her a reassuring nod, as though telling her not to be afraid. Then, to her greater shock, he announced, "From this day forward, Maya will not stand here only as a waitress. She will be promoted into management, with full training and education opportunities provided by my company. Her dedication, her character, and her bravery deserve more than a quiet thank you." The room erupted into applause. Customers clapped, some even standing to show their support. The twins jumped with excitement, cheering loudly for their superhero. Even a few of Maya's co-workers, who once doubted her, now smiled in admiration. Maya's throat tightened. Tears welled in her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. She stepped forward slowly, her voice trembling. "I don't know what to say. I never expected this. I only did what I thought was right." Mr. Lawson looked at her steadily. "That is exactly why you deserve it," he said. "You did not act for reward or recognition. You acted because of your heart. That is rare." The twins ran to her again, hugging her tightly. "Now you can be with us more," they exclaimed joyfully. Their innocent words made the crowd chuckle warmly. Maya's co-workers congratulated her, some patting her shoulder, others whispering apologies for their earlier doubts. The manager, though surprised, smiled proudly, realizing he had underestimated the young woman working under his watch. As the applause died down, Mr. Lawson leaned slightly closer to Maya, his voice low so only she could hear. "Your life is going to change, Maya. You may not see it now, but this is only the beginning." That evening, after the crowd had gone and the restaurant had quieted, Maya stood outside with the cool night air brushing her cheeks. She looked up at the sky, the stars faint above the city lights. Her heart still raced from the day's events. She thought of her mother and brother, of how this opportunity would lift the weight of their struggles. For the first time in years, hope filled her chest so strongly that it brought tears to her eyes. She remembered the moment the twins had fallen and how instinct had guided her steps. She realized that a single act of courage could open doors she never dreamed existed. She had not only saved 2 children that day, she had unknowingly stepped into a new future. Mr. Lawson's words echoed in her mind. "This is only the beginning." Maya smiled softly, wiping her tears. She knew the path ahead would not be easy. She would face new challenges, greater responsibilities, and more eyes watching her than ever before. But she also knew she was no longer just the waitress in the corner, unseen and underestimated. She was Maya, the woman who saved 2 lives and, in doing so, discovered her own strength. The twins would never forget her. Their father would always honor her. And Maya would carry that day in her heart as the moment everything changed. Her story was no longer hidden. It was now a light, shining quietly but powerfully, reminding everyone who heard it that even ordinary people can do extraordinary things when guided by courage and kindness.